Scrum is a process framework used primarily in software development, but I've seen it used in other factory situations, team-based projects, and even personal organization. Here I'm going to present how it can be used in the classroom. So this is a picture of the entire Scrum process, and I'm going to be walking you through every piece of this process in order to understand how it can be used in the classroom. So in Scrum, the semester is broken up into 4 to 5 work periods called sprints. Each sprint would be about 2 to 3 weeks, focus on a small number of topics, sometimes only one theme. And so this entire process will repeat itself 4 or 5 times. We start with a list of backlog tasks, and these tasks essentially represent everything that needs to be done in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We, as a general rule, don't add any tasks during a sprint, and that's so that the students know exactly what needs to get done, and it makes the sprint itself manageable from the professor's point of view. So we start with a number of backlog tasks, and these are the tasks that the students will have to do. And there's essentially a daily or very frequent cycle in Scrum. And it starts with what's called the daily stand-up. And in software development, the daily stand-up was done literally as a stand-up. In the morning, everyone on the team would stand up and answer the questions, what did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? And are there any impediments? In the classroom, this can be done formally, as in an actual stand-up and answer and have everyone go through. But for time purposes, many times an informal stand-up, does anyone have any questions about what they're working on? Any kind of impediments, anything getting in the way. And the goal here is so that everyone's constantly looking at the work, and anything that's kind of getting in their way, we raise along the way. And then we start with essentially the work in progress. Students will pull things from the backlog tasks. Depending on the class, the order of the work in progress doesn't really matter. And again, it depends on the class. Sometimes there's a definite progression, and the professor can kind of guide you through that, and there's a certain order. Other times, there's just a number of tasks that can be done in any order, and the students are left to make that decision. And as long as all of the backlog tasks are accomplished by the end of the semester, or actually rather at the end of the sprint. The next stage is what's called the validation stage, and one way to think of this is asking the question, what does done mean? What does it mean for a task to be done? And sometimes it's pretty straightforward. Other times you have to ask things like, does this task need some feedback from others? In a classroom, that may be, I've done a homework, I need to have the professor grade it, so it stands in validation until the professor grades it. Sometimes there's a self-assessment step. So I've done the task, but I need to compare to a solution, or I need to do a step where I do a self-assessment. And essentially it doesn't need some way to check that it meets the standards. And so something is not considered done until it has passed this validation step, and then we can move those tasks to be done. Okay. Now, so we continue this cycle through the entire sprint, accomplishing all the various backlog tasks. And at the end of every sprint, the sprint is marked at the end by what's called a demo. So the demo in software development would be some workable product. It wouldn't be something that necessarily was complete, but it was something that provides value, that was produced in this sprint, something that works. What does this look like in a classroom? Well, the demo could be an exam, it could be a presentation, it could be a paper, some other product that demonstrates what was produced during this sprint. And so it serves as a marker, and it serves as a goal for the sprint. You kind of see it coming, and so you're working, doing all the backlog tasks so that you can produce this demonstration product. After that demonstration product, which could be again an exam or a paper, something like that, we go on to the next step, which is called the retrospective. This is a chance for everyone to take some time to pause and consider, and it is useful to actually explicitly write this down, each student. And the questions you might want to ask are, what worked during this sprint, what didn't, what changes would I make for the next sprint? And these can be content related, things like, oh, I need to learn X, Y, and Z better. I didn't really demonstrate that in the last sprint. Or it could be process related, something like, I need to improve my time management skills, or I need to be able to handle distraction better. This is also a time for the professor to ask these questions, to do kind of a class retrospective for the class to review course processes and to suggest changes. So after the retrospective, essentially we do a planning for the next sprint, and we go back to the beginning. We populate the backlog for the next task. That's often done in the classroom by the professor, but it can be guided by what the students found they were having difficulty with. So in this sense, the class can adjust itself midstream during the semester in order to either add other topics or go into some topics in more detail, because in the last sprint there were some deficiencies that were shown. And the entire semester will have about 4 to 5 sprints throughout. So this is the entire process, and we can see we have these kind of cycles and this rhythm to the semester, and with deliberate places to pause and consider, and deliberate places to kind of build out what the next task is, and then also to look at the process. Now, because of all this, people have found it very helpful, and there's kind of standard sets of tools in order to help kind of monitor this process and to make it successful. So the process is separate from the tools, so you can use whatever tools will actually work and help you out in this process. So here is the some example tools that are often used. In many situations, they actually use a low-tech solution of sticky notes on a whiteboard, and each sticky note would be one of the backlog tasks. And then as it's getting worked on and this is often done in teams, but it can be done individually. As you're working on something, you move it to work in progress or something like that. And then when you're done with that, it moves to validation, or possibly sometimes called review, and then when that gets reviewed, it can get moved to done. And so this is to help kind of monitor for yourself and keep track of what you're working on. And this is especially useful if the tasks have no particular order, any necessary order to them. You can also use a more high-tech solution, something like Notion.so or Trello or something like that, where they have what they call a Kanban board, which is the same idea. And essentially you have a whole bunch of backlog items, and you can move them from one column to another one, and going to work in progress, going to validation, going to done. And then you can share the digital board with the professor. You can share it with other students in your team if you're working in teams or anything else, and so this is just a way of tracking that, and it can be very useful to be able to monitor that progress. So this was essentially a summary of the use of Scrum in the classroom, and there are a lot of resources online. If you search for Scrum, search for Kanban, you'll find this kind of structure, this kind of cyclical structure. The names might be slightly different, but essentially it's the same idea. So thank you very much.